Hamish, what can you tell us?
Do you know how?
OK, we can't speak to Hamish at the moment, but what we can show you are more pictures from Russell Square. This is the scene. There is the bus that we've been describing all morning.
Natural reaction and shock, but not the panic. And you haven't heard a lot of hate talk, which is a very, very good thing from those being interviewed. You've heard some questions about the government response, but that guy clearly is in shock that you've heard that from a lawyer.
Just a second, to back up your earlier point about the report that Scotland Yard contacted Israel about an imminent attack on their transportation system. Mike Tobin reporting from Israel that the Prime Minister has said he's brushing off reports from Scotland Yard that Israel had some prior intelligence or vice versa, saying it's all rumor and it's all typical of the early stages of reporting.
Well, let me ask you, Colonel, if you were Scotland Yard and you had learned that the attack was coming in a couple of minutes, you have the President of the United States and then other members of the G8 500 miles away, you have rush hour at London right at your fingertips, who are you going to call, the Israelis or the London Commissioner of Police to alert emergency services?
Yeah, it's a very good point, Judge. And Mansour was describing for us the intelligence apparatus when you get a warning. My reaction, though, with the way this came out, with someone saying that the Israelis have reported that the British didn't sound right, but it makes sense what Mansour's talking about, which is when an intelligence it hits, you would ask for a response for help, but it doesn't sound right because the report comes from London. I think you're right. You would be talking internally first, and you've already heard the very most senior man in the Metropolitan Police say, "I've never heard anything about it." You don't get this kind of warning. The IRA used to do this. Al Qaeda has the size of this would tell me no warning ahead of time.
All right, just real quick, the explosions inside London, which we have confirmed at least 6 this morning, taking place over the last few hours, have prompted an increase in security over in D.C., and we understand the NYPD Commissioner, Ray Kelly, most likely will hold a press conference, and it will be available today to address the New York City response to this, because, as the Colonel mentioned, and as you all know out there, we're shoulder to shoulder in the war on terror, and the UK and US seem to be one of the two nations that get it. And as you look at the G8 summit taking place 500 miles away, the top of their agenda was global warming. The top of their agenda was African aid. Important, yes, but maybe the top of the agenda should have been terrorism to begin with. It certainly will now.
It certainly will now, is right. Christopher Walker, are you still with us?
It's been announced.
Christopher?
Yes.
We're going to hear from the Prime Minister in about 3 minutes. What's he going to tell us?
I think he's going to tell us to keep calm. He's going to tell us that Britain will never give in to terrorist threats. And I believe he's going to tell us that he intends to continue with the G8 meeting, which, of course, was due to open this morning.
Are there any reports that you're getting, any new or more update reports on the number of casualties, Christopher?
No, because they deliberately hold back on deaths until they've informed the next of kin. So 2 is the only number confirmed, but there have been unofficial reports of up to 20. These are completely unconfirmed, but those who've seen the sites themselves say that there's got to be more than 2, and really people are just anticipating the worst. They're used to IRA bombs, where the first the first report is of casualties, then deaths come later. But I certainly know that in Aldgate 1 tube station, 2 were dead and 9 very seriously injured.
Okay, so that would be the first casualty report. Where did you get that report from?
That report came from official police sources, and there's no question about that. Of course, we have to just hold our fingers when somebody's very seriously injured, but as I reported to you earlier, there have been signs of people being transported to hospitals in vehicles other than ambulances, and there's been this major problem with the traffic. The first report of the bombs, we were saying just before 10 o'clock, but it does seem there's now been an official report that the first notion that the authorities got was at 9:16, when somebody, the first people down on the tube network, dark and frightening tunnels were seen emerging near one station.
Christopher, stay with us. We'll certainly want to come back to you after the Prime Minister speaks. Our colleague Edie Hill is joining us now at just about the 7 a.m. Eastern hour.
A lot of people probably waking up right now, and we don't want you to panic, because in situations like this, information comes in very fast and furious, and we will bring it to you as soon as we get it. But keep in mind that a lot of things are confusing right now. We do know this for sure. There have been at least a half dozen explosions in London. We know that at least one was a double-decker bus that was at the Russell Square, around the Russell Square station. Half the bus was torn off. The top half was actually torn off. We know that there have been many casualties there. We know that there have been subway explosions, perhaps as many as 5. And at least one of the subway explosions at Aldgate. 2 people are confirmed dead by the police, and a doctor at the site there says there have been at least 90 casualties. So that's the information we have. We know that there are bomb-sniffing dogs out there, and according to the Dow Jones Information Service, they claim that there have been at least 3 bomb attacks, but that has not been confirmed by anyone else.
Tony Blair is expected to address the press and the worldwide media in a matter of moments. We understand right up at 7 o'clock local time. But it was interesting in the early reports where the first explosions were at 8:49 local time there in London, 5 hours ahead of us. Now we understand it was a little bit later than that. My one fear, and I'm sure there's many fears to be out there, is that some are still trapped in the tube system, in the subway system down there, because when those explosions happen, there's no immediate evacuation plan, I would imagine. Some have said that London is braced for this. They've been through it before. That is true. Others have pointed out, and as in major cities, you can walk in, there's no metal detectors in buses, there's no metal detectors into subways. This is a system that is open, and a system especially open in light of the major concert that took place a few days ago that brought tens of thousands to that major city.
But this is London. This is post 9/11, so I'm certain that there was an evacuation plan. They've got exits there. They have emergency signs there in the tubes. So they've got some sort of an evacuation plan. The question is whether or not they've been able to get people down there into the subways to start clearing people out. I mean, some who were near the exits were able to get out already because we've gotten eyewitness confirmation on some things that have happened.
And another question is the ability with which the folks running the trains and the police could even communicate with each other. We heard some pretty severe criticism of a passenger himself of a minor injury, but suggesting why were we allowed to get on these trains when some of the explosions on other trains had already occurred? They should have shut the whole system down and not let us on it. Of course, we'll learn eventually the timing of these bombs.
The police chief, Sir Ian Blair, addressed the media about 20 minutes ago. Sky was able to pick it up. We were able to bring it to you. And he said that he thinks it's a matter of time before everything is brought under control and to show a degree of calm about you. But he does not think, and he shouldn't, that we're out of the woods yet in terms of explosions, especially in light of the unexplosive devices that have been recovered. Joining us and have been contributing with us is Chris Walker of Global Radio. Now, Chris, earlier today we talked about 7 explosions, and you talked about hearing reports of more than one double-decker bus being a target. Have you heard any more about that?
I've heard that it possibly 2 and maybe 3.
We have to cut into you right now. Sorry, Colonel Hunt. We've got to listen to Prime Minister Tony Blair right now.
To you on the terrible events that have happened in London earlier today. And I hope you understand that at the present time we're still trying to establish exactly what has happened. And there's a limit to what information I can give you. And I'll simply try and tell you the information as best I can at the moment. It's reasonably clear that there have been a series of terrorist attacks in London. There are obviously casualties, both people that have died and people seriously injured. And our thoughts and prayers, of course, are with the victims and their families. It's my intention to leave the G8 within the next couple of hours and go down to London and get a report face-to-face with the police and the emergency services and the ministers that have been dealing with this, and then to return later this evening. It is the will of all the leaders at the G8, however, that the meeting should continue in my absence, that we should continue to discuss the issues that we were going to discuss. and reach the conclusions which we were going to reach. Each of the countries around that table has some experience of the effects of terrorism, and all the leaders, as they will indicate a little bit later, share our complete resolution to defeat this terrorism. It's particularly barbaric that this has happened on a day when people are meeting to try to help the problems of poverty in Africa and the long-term problems of climate change and the environment. Just as it is reasonably clear, designed with the opening of the G8. There will be time to talk later about this. It's important, however, that those engaged in terrorism realize that our determination to defend our values and our way of life is greater than their determination to cause death and destruction to innocent people in a desire to impose extremism on the world. Whatever they do, it is our determination that they will never succeed in destroying what we hold dear in this country and in other civilized nations throughout the world. Thank you.
Tony Blair's brief address to the world community, who are obviously horrified by what is happening in London this morning. And the first attack has ranged from 8:49, Edie, until 9:16 today. The bottom line is the people of London, we're hearing eyewitness accounts today. We're just trying to make sense of exactly what they're going through.
So we can't even find out exactly what time the bomb occurred.
No, we don't know that.
That's interesting. Tony Blair obviously stating what everybody has already realized, and that is that this is a terrorist attack in London, a series of them, in fact. We know that there have been at least 6, recapping, 1 at least on a bus. The Dow Jones Information Service is suggesting that there have been 3 buses that were attacked. We know that many other subway stations also were targets.
The Prime Minister informed London and the world that he will soon leave the G8 for a few hours to come down to London to assess the situation, perhaps to address Parliament, and he'll return this evening. We're going to go to one eyewitness right now.
And it was, you know, honestly, for the first 2 seconds we didn't know we were going to get out. And then we just had to sit on the train, and we sat there listening to people screaming who were obviously injured, and yeah, and we just waited and waited, and it felt like an hour, but it probably wasn't. It was probably about half an hour maybe, and they loaded us off from the back, and we all had to kind of clamber through, walk along the lines, and then we got out at King's Cross, and then ever since then we've been sitting on buses at King's Cross station waiting to come to the hospital, and that's kind of it. So it was all a bit scary, really.
And what happened in hospital? What heard about what has happened?
Not much. Obviously there are some people that are really badly bleeding. There's lots of staff in there, you know, there's huge amounts of doctors, and everyone's really organised and good. But obviously the problem is now when people are being at home, you know, I live in Hull.
Trouble with that feed from Sky News, but bear with us. We're going to try to get you as much live information from the streets as possible, so we're going to hit glitches like that. The London police, as you can see now, say that the situation is coming under control in the event that there are no more blasts. They suggest that they could have control restored by the next couple of hours or so. That, according to the London police chief. Prime Minister Tony Blair is leaving the G8 conference, and he is heading back to London, where there is great confusion. We know that one doctor on the scene has treated at least 90 casualties at the Aldgate blast site, and we know of 2 confirmed deaths in these attacks.
Yeah, when you talk about blasts, you're talking about coordinated blasts, and that according to the London police chief. And he was also fearing that we're not out of the woods yet in terms of the attacks. But one thing is certainly clear is that there's a degree of misinformation coming out in terms of the number of attacks. For example, 2 hours ago, we hear 7 blasts, 3 of which were on double-decker buses. We can only confirm 1 at this hour. We do know this, that all public transportation has grinded to a halt, and and now we're getting more and more eyewitnesses coming out, one of which was kind of aggravated, saying that after the first blast, he was surprised that his subway system was allowed, his subway train could actually continue.
Okay, let's go to London, to Wendell Goler. He is at Gleneagles, Scotland. At the Wendell, what's happening there?
Well, as you heard, Edie, just a couple of minutes ago, Prime Minister Blair telling reporters he intends to go back to London for a matter of hours at least to check on the situation there after a series of attacks he says were clearly designed to coincide with the start of the summit here in Scotland. The other 7 G8 partners intend to continue work, if you will, on the issues of global warming and solving poverty in Africa, which are the central themes of this summit. Blair, of course, on the telephone immediately after word of the blasts, and so was President Bush. Washington's Metro immediately tightened security in the wake of the London attacks. More bomb-sniffing dogs on the platform, more heavily armed security officers in anticipation of the start of rush hour there, beginning very shortly now. Officials won't say if President Bush ordered this tightened security or if, as is perhaps more likely, it was an automatic response. Security extraordinarily tight here at Gleneagles, but the hotel where we stayed last night in Glasgow was evacuated a short while ago after a suspicious package was found there. We'll give you an update on what they find. This is the first summit since the September 11th attacks in which global terrorism, security, weapons proliferation was not the major focus. Prime Minister Blair saying it was particularly ironic, particularly bitter.
I'm sorry, we need to cut in. As you know, everything is in flux right now. We want to go to this news conference and find out the very latest in London.
And Leicester Square underground stations. I can also confirm that there's been an explosion on a bus in Tavistock Square. However, it's too early to confirm the cause of this explosion. At King's Cross Station, there is currently a rescue operation in the tunnel down in the line. Although we cannot confirm casualty figures, as it is too early, but we are dealing with large numbers of casualties, and we believe there are a number of fatalities. All underground lines are currently closed, and all national railway lines into London are also closed. Our advice to commuters is to take advice of emergency services and currently avoid travelling in London at present. And we ask all of you, if you need to use the LAS, by all means, but try not to unnecessarily at this time. As you can imagine, our services are quite stretched dealing with these incidents. That ends the statement. Thank you.
Can you just tell us how your members are coping with this at the moment?
Lisa, stay with us. We can just see you in front of the camera there. We were just hearing there from Paul Woodrow of the ambulance services. Indeed, apart from the commentary that
that's interesting. When you hear about an explosion in the subway, the tube system, you hope everyone got out. Unfortunately, there's a rescue operation going on, which we just heard for the first time. It's at King's Cross. It's going on in the tunnel. And so far, the double-decker bus that exploded is at Tavistock Square.
Yeah, we know that there are rescue operations going on at all of these sites right now. They're also looking for suspicious packages. They have found one. We do not know yet whether or not that is another bomb. They say that they're rescuing people right now in the tunnel of King's Cross. We know the top blew off at Russell Square, but that police source just said that there is also a bus that was exploded at Tavistock Square. Now, unfortunately, I do not know London well enough to know exactly where that is, if that is somewhere near Russell Square and they're talking about the same location, or if that is someplace else.
Let's go to Peter Gornan, who's on the phone with us. It was an eyewitness. Peter, what do you know?
I was in my office in Tavistock Square, which is the British Medical Association, and I heard a very loud bomb, and what sounded like a bomb, a very loud explosion. I left my office room and went out into the general office space, and there was some panic. I looked out of a window, and there was a great deal of smoke, and there was a bus outside with the roof had been blown off.
Tell us exactly, where is this Tavistock Square? Is that near Russell Square? Is that the same site?
Yes, it's about 2 to 3 minutes walk north of Russell Square and just south of Euston Station, which is a pretty main train station.
What kind of injuries did you see, if any, as a result of the explosion on the bus?
No specific injuries, bodies, but no specific injuries.
Dead bodies?
I was too far away. Well, there were bodies lying. Whether they were dead or not, I've got no idea.
Can you describe the scene as you look around? Not only look out, but can you compare it to what you've witnessed and experienced over the last hour?
Well, initially there was a sense of panic, and it was extremely frightening. Afterwards, we were evacuated pretty quickly, and then shortly, and there were just a lot of people crowding around in the streets, very unsure of what was happening. We were told at some points there were unexploded bombs and there may be controlled explosions taking place, but we never heard anything after that. A lot of helicopters and emergency services everywhere.
Are you going back to work or are you going home?
No, I was going to go home, but I seem to have been involved in several different interviews, so I'm not sure what I'm doing, and I'm not even sure how anyone's going to get home at the moment.
Well, that's just, yeah, I'm wondering, is there any mass transport available now in the City of London?
No, not as far as I know. I wouldn't have thought so. As far as I understand, there's been, I mean, I'm sure you know more than I do, but as far as I understand, there's been several bombs all over London, so I would think they've shut it all down.
What is the feeling on the streets with respect to panic, calm, fear?
As I said, initially there was certainly a very panicky, emotional feeling. Some people hadn't turned up to work yet, so there was. People were worried whether they were on the bus or where they were. We understand there were bombs on tube stations as well, so it was very it was quite upsetting for a lot of people. It then calmed down a bit, but there is still a pretty significant feeling of uncertainty as to what's going on, and a lot of emergency services around, and obviously all of television cameras and things like that. So it's a very surreal scene at the moment, I think.
We know that because of the G8 conference, even though it's 500 miles to the north there, and because of the concerts that were held this weekend, that London was already on the highest alert, highest security alert. Did you see any extra precautions as you were taking, taking the subway in or walking around London?
No, none at all. I think the problem was that a lot of extra police have been flown up to Gleneagles for the G8, and I don't know if that meant that London's been understaffed. I mean, there's plenty of police and ambulance people around at the moment, but no, I haven't noticed any increased security presence myself. No, not in London.
Right now, we're going to go out to D.C., where the London Telegraph has their one of their reporters there, the D.C. bureau chief. And I'm sorry, what's your name?
Yes, okay.
Alec Russell?
Yes, morning.
Alec,
good morning.
I know you're getting reports from D.C., but your sources are right in the heart of the city. What can you tell us? We have 6 explosions, 1 on a double-decker bus.
Well, I mean, I don't think many people in London know a huge amount more than you're seeing here unfolding on the television. I mean, one thing that has to be stressed is that Britain has had terrorism before, and a lot of people I've spoken to, they're shocked and they're appalled, but it's almost as if they're entering into a mode of thinking that they set aside 10, 15 years ago when the worst died down. But there were awful attacks in the mid-80s. Now, that's not trying to minimize the shock that people are feeling. I mean, I've spoken to a number of people in London and outside London, and the country is feeling absolutely stunned. They knew, we always knew that something was probably going to happen. It seemed inevitable, but that doesn't make it any more shocking when it does happen.
In terms of emergency services, you're saying that this is an experienced city, but in terms of vulnerability, is it a city that's been hardened as a target?
Yes, I think you're right on. You're right on both scores there. The emergency services. I mean, watching some of the police chiefs and some of the ambulance workers at work and speaking in the last few hours, I have to say I felt rather proud. They've sort of exuded calm and professionalism. They've sort of just gone into the standard mode. Yes, this is an emergency. In terms of the city being prepared for this, it's terribly difficult. I mean, after the 9/11 attacks, I was in London at the time, and everyone was thinking we are bound to be hit at some some stage after what has happened in New York and Washington. So what should we be doing about it? But I suspect that everyone has, including the security services, have calmed down slightly, and the security precautions, I mean, how do you secure a huge city like London, packed with people for the summer? July is the busiest time, the underground's always full. It's very, very difficult.
Alec, help us out with the geography a bit. One of the police officials recently said the explosions occurred at the following 6 locations: King's Cross, Edgware Road, Liverpool Street, Leicester Square, Aldgate, and Russell Square. Now, how great a distance is this? How much space is there from one end of this to the other?
By London standards, that's quite a compact area. We're looking at central London. I mean, whoever has perpetrated these attacks, they've struck right at the heart of London. It's the old centre. So Euston, King's Cross, Leicester Square, all these places, they're within about a mile of each other. There is a square mile, possibly 2 square miles, no more than that.
And is this the financial, would you describe that area as the financial hub, or is only a section of that?
It's partly the financial hub. Once you get to Aldgate, you're nearing the edge of the city. It's the edge of the city, with the city is the area, is the name we give to the main financial district. It's not actually the financial district itself. But it's very much central London.
In terms of warnings, evidently there are some conflicting reports that maybe London was tipped off that they could be the center of attack, exposed to an attack shortly.
Yeah, the Israelis are saying there's one Israeli source claiming that. Have you heard anything?
Yes, no, I've seen that. Again, I've spoken to colleagues at my paper in London. There's no confirmation for that. I mean, I suppose it's quite possible. We just don't know, I'm afraid.
What are you doing? What is your newspaper doing right now as you call back into London to find out what the next step is? Where do you think the greatest traffic is? Where do you think the center of this is? Because I imagine there's a lot of stress, a lot of tension on the rescue operation. We understand that's going on in the tube.
Well, for Britain, I mean, in journalistic terms, this is the biggest story, the hideous word to use, I know, but terrorist atrocity, since the 9/11 attacks. In fact, really, depending on the scale of the casualties for us, it is the equivalent. So it's a bigger story for a British newspaper than the 9/11 attack.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We appreciate your time and the information this morning.
Let's go to Chris Walker, who's been with us since the beginning of this a few hours ago from Global Radio News. Chris, what's the latest?
Well, the latest is that a number of developments. The G8 leaders are going to issue a statement in their own name about this atrocity very soon, we've just been told. The BBC, which is fairly well connected in these matters, is quoting Arab sources as saying that it was certainly the work of Al-Qaeda. There's been some rather mealy-mouthed statements from the authorities who really don't want to give too much away and certainly don't want to increase the mood of panic on some of the streets. Buckingham Palace has been completely ringed off. That could be the most symbolic of targets, and we're getting some very gruesome news that at King's Cross Station, or one of the stations, I believe it's King's Cross, there are operations actually taking place below ground. And I think you've got to realise how deep some of our tube tunnels are in London. Of course, they were used during the Second World War and the Blitz to shelter from the German bombs. So it's a very, very tricky operation getting people out from right down there under the city.
Well, we know at the G8 summit has taken over the entire agenda, and we understand that Tony Blair addressed everyone just a moment ago, and if you look into the nuances of his words, it seems as though when he talked about extremism and talked about the attack and that his way of life will not be stopped by any series of terror attacks, you get the understanding that Tony Blair is jumping to the same conclusions because of the fingerprints we're seeing and the experiences we've had over the last 2 years, that this is Al-Qaeda, this is Islamist extremists trying to send a message.
I myself lived through IRA attacks in London, and they were, of course, nothing on this scale. And, of course, there was no IRA man who ever was prepared to be a suicide bomber. And that's, of course, totally increased the problem of defending the city. And as, for instance, compared with Israel, where they have guards on the buses, anybody here can get on a bus, and I do understand that the buses that were involved in today's attacks were all packed with people.
Now, Christopher, you just said buses. What bus, other than the one at Russell Square, Tavistock Square, are you aware of being bombed?
I'm only aware of the reports that there was more than one bus. Now, nobody has confirmed its whereabouts.
Okay, so
but they are talking about buses.
All right. Thank you very much. You know, I want to remind our viewers that we are trying to bring you information as quickly as possible. We want to confirm the information that we give you, and if it's unconfirmed, we're going to let you know that. We'll pass it on. We'll tell you it's not confirmed. So that is one of them. There are some unofficial reports of more than one bus being bombed. But the only thing we know for sure is that one was, and there have been casualties there. We are told that that there were a number of people that were lying on the street. We do not know if they were just simply injured or if they are dead. Right now, let's bring in Colonel David Hunt. Colonel, one of the things that's most difficult about this is that as you're trying to figure out if there could be more bombs, if you're safe in the clear, you try to determine who is behind this. The IRA, Al Qaeda, the two top names coming up, very different styles, though. What, from what you've seen, would you suspect is happening here? Who's behind it?
Yeah, the IRA, I don't believe had. I mentioned that before as a reference history lesson because of what's happened in London in the last 15 years ago.
But is this their MO?
No, not this size. This is no one's MO. And the IRA, as we know, have been trying to give peace offerings. This would be very unusual for the IRA in the middle of what they've been trying to do for the last 4 years to then come up and do this. It certainly has, as we've seen in Madrid, an Al Qaeda look to this. But the size of this area, that's about a 10-mile area you're describing, and the fact that it was aimed at the heart of London, it obviously has political tones and trying to create the mass amount of panic. The great news is the British have not panicked. The emergency response system has worked very, very well. The problem you've got, as you mentioned, is finding other bombs. It's been unconfirmed that there have been two, more likely just one, and the good news is they'll get great intelligence from that found bomb. They'll blow it up.
They say it is a suspicious package, and that's all they will officially confirm.
Right.
Some people are suggesting that it is a bomb. They're trying to, take it apart and figure it out. But all we know for certain is that it is a suspicious package, and you've got to bet that anything that's lying around right now, they're taking second and third looks at.
But they've got a good news. They've also stopped any more movement in public transportation.
Right.
You can imagine how that would affect a city the size of London at this time, but that's very, very well done. So they've got to clear the streets to allow more emergency responders. The most difficult operation, two most difficult operations, would be to rescue somebody in a building, a high building. The next would be in a tunnel complex.
Right.
As it's already been mentioned, those are so well built they've been used as bomb shelters. That's a very difficult. British are very good at it. That's going to take some time.
Colonel, that's what I want to bring you to. There's a rescue operation going on underground that's been confirmed. So that protection from bombings above, could that work against you when you try to get people out from below?
Yes, except the British have practiced on their own tunnel systems. The also thing will tell you, because of how well those were built, when you put an explosion in a place like that, it adds to the weight and power and destructiveness of an explosion. It's insidious. But the British have practiced. They're very, very good at rescue tunnels, but it takes time, lights, smoke, and getting the right equipment down there. At the same time, trying to clear the streets above, because once you bring people out, you've got to get them to the right hospitals, the right trauma centers. It seems to me, though, again, we're not hearing a lot of hate talk in London. You're seeing the British resolve, and an excellent response, which could panic an entire city. It seems to me that The British are reacting extremely well, and so are we. You're going to hear from Kelly and others about all the precautions we'll take, which make common sense.
Well, Colonel, let's update that. Stay with us right now, but let's give everybody an update right now. U.S. officials are saying that they have absolutely no intelligence that would suggest to them that there are any attacks similar to what's happening in London planned for the United States.
And there's no plan to raise the terror alert here in the U.S.
We have gotten one person who has emailed us and said that in the metro in D.C., she saw security guards with machine guns. We spoke with an officer in the metro at D.C. They won't confirm that, but they say that they have increased the security presence there. In London, they were already on the highest of alert levels because they had the series of concerts and they had the G8 summit going on. But Colonel Hunt, if someone is intending to bomb a free society, free open society, there's really no way to absolutely stop that, is there?
Colonel might have passed, but if you also look at the immigration system, if they're besieged by tens of thousands of people all trying to do the same thing, and that's rush right to the center of the city to see what they call as an A+ rock event, maybe people can get a little bit more careless because of the overwhelming volume. Still with us in the center of the city is Mansour Ejaz. He's a Fox Terror analyst, and you're very familiar with the city. So far, Mansour, when you look at what has happened, the simultaneous explosions that have lasted over a couple of hours, what have you ascertained?
Look, I mean, it's very clear that this has all the hallmarks of the type of terrorism that we've seen in Madrid, and there's no question that this was a very clear attempt to send a message to the G8 summit. I think there was the collateral benefit of it coming the day after the announcement was made here that London was going to host the 2012 Olympic Games. As I said before earlier this morning, the big bone of contention between Paris and London was the quality of the infrastructure that moves people around. They hit, if you look at all of these places that they hit, for example, Russell Square is a professional square where a lot of accountancy offices, legal offices, things like that, people who are part of the economic infrastructure of the city center of London, that's where they go to work in Russell Square. If you look at the fact that they didn't hit the financial center, it's mainly because after all the IRA bombs in the previous decades had taken place, the London financial center now is more or less locked down. You can't even get close to it, much less be able to do the kind of stuff that they did today.
Mansour, in our studios here in New York, we're watching our sister network Sky News, and we see a lot of emergency personnel. We see streets blocked off, and occasionally we go back to the remnants of the exploded double-decker bus. What do you see when you look out your hotel window?
Well, now it's pretty calm, but again, earlier today you had a mass exodus because we have one of the larger underground stations here right near Buckingham Palace. There was a mass exodus of people that obviously couldn't get anywhere else, and so they had to come out. It was very, orderly and calm. You didn't see any sense of panic here.
Right.
Now it's more or less pretty much normal the way that the traffic flow is working. I don't see anything that would indicate what has happened in the city center here is what happened today.
All right, Mansour, thank you very much. We're going to keep updating with you. But, I think that there is something to be said right now, and that is there is such a likeness between America and England.
Right.
And when you saw the scenes in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, you saw the walking wounded, the people coming out of the World Trade Center, the financial district, walking up north. And there was
sense of being dazed.
They were dazed, but there wasn't the panic. And that's the exact same way we see the people in London reacting. They're strong. They're strong people. And while people are confused, while they are walking around with wounds, in one case, a man had his clothes blown off. According to the AP, many are refusing offers of help. They're strong people, and America is with you. We understand that we're all in this together.
Absolutely. And you're not out of it yet, and you know that over in London. Tadek Murkowski is our producer over there in Russell Square, where a lot of the drama is taking place. Russell Square, target of the attacks. Tadek, as you look around, what do you see?
Well, Brian, I can't see much at the moment because London police have got this area completely locked off There's a lot of media gathering now. The police tape trying to get a look at this double-decker bus that's been blown apart by eyewitness accounts that we're getting. But we, the media, have been kept well back. Residents who are living inside this zone are being asked to stay away, even though people are saying my children are in there, my husbands are in there, my father's in there. They're being told to stay away. All the area, all the traffic is being stopped. So it's incredibly hard to get anywhere near this explosion where this blast took place. The police are being very vigilant.